as Don said, I'm a former NTSB aircraft accident investigator and flight test engineer. So let's jump right into this and do a few introductions. First, as Don said, QR codes, check out the faculty bios so you can read more about all of us. We got some great presenters. I'm excited about this panel. Being in the government for 13 years, government contracting is quite chaotic, and so far this panel is going to give us some great information.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Dan O'Shea. I am the commercial and public sector sales lead at MatrixSpace. So those of you unfamiliar with us, we are a tactical radar manufacturer. So we service everything from the counter UAS side to DoD contracts to commercial BVLOS. So thrilled to be here to talk about our experiences moving through government contracting.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Next, we have Lauren Regiec from Carahsoft.
Hi, everyone. I am Lauren, and I am a vertical team lead over at Carahsoft. So I really work on creating our vertical line card around autonomy and robotics and working with technology partners to help expand their government business and develop channel programs. We also work really closely with Dawn as our consultant. Really excited to be here and looking forward to meeting each of you.
Thanks, Lauren. Next is Eric Ransom. Little out of order, sorry.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here. Eric Ransom, I'm a partner at Crowell in DC. I was 12 years in government at the Government Accountability Office, defense contract management auditing, and bid protest work. I worked on the B-21 stealth bomber, worked on the NASA SpaceX Crew Dragon contract. Relevant here, I think I was also the first general counsel for the defense business at Scale AI, working on the autonomy portfolio and working on NGA issues. Now I'm back in private practice, basically at the intersection of advanced technologies, artificial intelligence, autonomy, and defense.
Thanks, Eric. Next, we have Tom Swoyer.
Good morning. My name is Tom Swoyer, and I'm the president of GrandSKY in Grand Forks, North Dakota. My role is, as president of the company, is all the finance, all the contracts, and management overall of the entire development of the flight center. My role really encompasses writing all the proposals and getting the work in and getting the contracts in that we can then use to leverage our own growth.
Thanks, Tom. And last, we have Casie, Ocana from AUVSI.
Good morning, everyone. Casie, Ocana. I am the Vice President of Public Affairs for AUVSI. So that includes marketing, communications, and then most relevant to this conversation, the Green UAS program, which is a cybersecurity and supply chain certification program for federal government, as well as state and local.
Great. Thank you. You guys can have a seat and we'll kick this thing off. So just to be sure, trying to secure government awards, it can be a daunting challenge for anybody. Even when I worked in the government, it was a hard thing to do. And we're going to look into securing this for the autonomy space. So this morning, we have this great panel here of government leaders, advisors, distributors, and contractors that are going to help to demystify this process and the laws and the rules applicable to these highly sought-after contracts and grants. So these experts are going to give us practical advice on how to successfully land a federal, state, local, tribal, or even a territorial government level deal. So let's dive right into this and get going. So first, I'd like to say, Eric, can you start by explaining the current legal framework governing these contracts and why folks need to understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you may have heard of the Federal Acquisition Regulation. I think for 30 years, we would have been talking primarily about that. We would have probably been diving into small business innovation research or SBIR R&D funding. And those are still really important, right? You need to know the FAR. SBIR is still a great program for R&D dollars. But I think increasingly as the approach to the defense market has changed, and you have more companies that are doing work on their own, not just having government-funded development, there are some other tools. People need to understand non-FAR-based contracts and agreements. So cooperative research and development agreements, if you're not familiar with those allow government to transfer expertise, personnel, technology into the private sector and then collaboratively work on solutions. It doesn't transfer money, it transfers access, but that can be a great way for companies to get in front of the government with their own solutions. Also increasingly things like vendor demonstration agreements. I think Small business technology transfer agreements with university partners is also increasingly a part of getting advanced technologies out of fundamental research at universities and into DoD. But I think most importantly, over the last year or couple of years, companies in this space have to understand other transaction authority and the commercial solutions opening award process. We'll talk more about that, but it's never been more important to be up to date with how the government is actually spending the money in these cutting edge technologies.
Great. So, Eric, just to stay on that topic a little bit, so I understand that landscape has evolved significantly, especially with the National Defense Authorization Act of 2025 that was just signed at the end of December 2024. So what are we seeing there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, it's funny because December seems like a very, very, very long time ago right now. But that's right. We did in the NDAA, we got some new middle tier acquisition authority that's giving priority and accelerating contracts for capabilities that can be fielded within 5 years. So again, trying to get things to the field, to the edge faster. I think, since the NDAA, now even 5 years seems like too long to a lot of people. So there are ways we'll talk about through executive orders that are moving even faster. We've got more emphasis on accepting commerciality of stuff that's done by businesses that are not government funded. So increasing the ability of them to sell into the government under more simplified rules, which is helpful. I think also companies should understand, though, that there are definitions for commerciality, but non-traditional companies can also get an exception to have anything they do be treated as commercial, which is a really powerful authority. It's pretty easy to access and it should be used more. But we also have on the other side, we have some new rules around working with China. We have some new supply chain security rules. We have emerging and evolving cybersecurity regulations in general. And in the CBER contract connection, it's a little bit older, but I just want to mention the CBER Foreign Influence Due Diligence Program. It's really kind of coming into its own right now. And it's supposed to be a program that's based on mitigation and getting to award, but we've seen some very harsh decisions out of those programs. And so companies need to be more careful than ever with foreign investment and kind of highly placed researchers that may have connections to foreign universities. It's a real kind of emerging issue.
Great. So, Lauren, Carahsoft keeps its eyes trained on these legislative updates. So what's your perspective on the NDAA provisions?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of increased funding, and Congress has really enhanced budgets for programs like Defense Innovation Unit and autonomy engineering for the next generation combat vehicle. And with all this, it just really shows a clear commitment towards advancing autonomous technologies. There's also a strong focus on the integration of autonomy technologies. So we're seeing efforts to develop, and transition hybrid and electric vertical takeoff and landing from the commercial world into active military services. And this is just such a significant step forward in modernizing our defense capabilities. As Eric alluded to, supply chain security does remain a major concern. So NDAA does have provisions for developing supply chain risk framework to help boost domestic manufacturing capacity as it relates to all the critical components in uncrewed systems. And this is just really crucial to ensure that we're remaining resilient and secure. Lastly, I want to touch on all of the initiatives around counter UAS measures. And these initiatives are really around to address any potential threats that are posed by small UAS to United States forces and bases. And this is just seriously becoming an incredibly important aspect of our defense strategies.
Thanks. So, Eric, back to you. I hear there's some new executive orders coming from the Trump administration this year, only a couple, but they've impacted these federal procurement policies. Can you walk us through some of those?
It's been incredibly dynamic. I think, look, this is just a major acceleration in a trend that we've seen since the first Obama administration, which is a new president gets in and they want to influence the economy through whatever levers they have. And so, let's remember just for a second, United Airlines, government contractor, right? Harvard University, Google, Amazon.com, government contractors. So we're using these levers to increasingly influence wide swaths of the economy. In this connection, right, for autonomy and uncrewed systems, this has been largely good news, I think. We saw even below the White House level coming out of DoD in March, them making a preference towards OTAs and the commercial solutions opening process for software, which really helps the software side of the stack. And then in general, in April, we got the Modernizing Defense Acquisition Executive Order, which extended that same policy towards defense procurement generally. And so that is a change that's going to make it much easier for newer companies and non-traditional companies to compete. We're talking about starting big procurements with 15 slide decks, pitch decks, in-person pitches instead of the traditional 100 or 200 page proposals. So it makes it much more accessible. But I think I just want to point out that more flexible terms and more flexible contracting doesn't mean lower risk. And so if we look at an agency like DARPA, for example, for years, they've been using OTAs to actually grab more rights in technology than they would be entitled to under the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And so I think this is a great flexibility. It makes these contracts more accessible, but doesn't lower risk. And so companies, if you don't have good in-house counsel, you don't have people that are knowledgeable about these contracting processes, more important than ever to protect yourself in those negotiations.
Great. So now that we appreciate the laws and the government around these government contracts, we're going to talk about the wide variety of federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial contracts. Lauren, Carahsoft has connections with all of them. Let's start with the federal ones. Can you tell us about some of those?
Yeah, sure. So we have 3 primary acquisition vehicles. These are all government-wide procurement contracts, and they really just help provide an avenue for customers to procure these technology products. So it doesn't necessarily guarantee the sale, but rather just helps to become more streamlined and easier to purchase. So the first one is GSA, and GSA is tied very, very closely to DIU's Blue UAS program. We can supply drone hardware and software on there. The next one is NASA SOUP. SOUP is Solution Enterprise-Wide Procurement, and while we can't add drone hardware there, we can add any related software, so AI, cybersecurity, geospatial, you name it. The last one is the ITES contract. This is a CHESS contract, which is computer hardware, enterprise solutions, and software, and it's managed by the Army, but all 3 of these federal contract vehicles are available for defense, intel communities, civilian, even tribal organizations as well.
Cool. Well, Lauren, so what type of state and local government vehicles are available for the autonomy space?
Yeah, so there's many state-specific contract vehicles. A lot of them are actually GSA-based. So GSA is managed by the federal government, but some states do have contracts based off of that, like California CMAS or New Mexico has some. New York has a ton, even just cities like City of Seattle. So we have those, but then the main ones to know are cooperative purchasing agreements, and those are all predetermined terms and conditions, so it really helps to speed up the sales cycle. It's all publicly awarded. Those are like your NASPOs, where it's available to 38 states. Omnia partners are available to all states. It's really just any state government, county, municipality that needs to adhere to those state laws.
Question, Michael.
Yeah.
So forgive me for interrupting the flow here a little bit, but I have a question. So you just rattled off a bunch of great contracts with the federal government side, and those are contracts that Carahsoft has, right? So everybody in this room could work with you, and you could bring the contract vehicle, and they could bring a technology or a product or a service or a location or whatever it is to you, and you have the contract vehicle that the government can then apply funding to. And I think that's a really important small, maybe it's a subtle point, but the contract vehicle exists, and the vehicle becomes the funnel through which the federal government can flow funds. And Carahsoft has them. That's one of our approaches, is how do you get the funnel in your hand to be able to bring the money in? So if you have an interesting technology and you're not sure how to approach the government, this is a company that can help you do that and put you right in front of those customers. And then those customers can apply their methodology to bring the money to that contract vehicle. So I thought that would bear some discussion there.
No, that was a great ad, Tom. That was great. So let's move on to processes and programs. So, Dan, there are certainly a number of contract vehicles out there. We've just heard of a few of these, but currently we're also seeing stricter proposal submission deadlines and processes across various programs, such as the Small Business Innovative Research, or SBIR, or the Small Business Technology Transfer. I don't know if there's a great way to call that. STTR, STTR programs. So, Dan, if you could talk to a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So we at MatrixSpace, we've been really trying to capitalize on a lot of the things like SBIRs, TACVIs to try to basically advance our own sales, but also kind of advance our own research and development. And so the experience that we've had going through like the SBIR process, for instance, has been a relatively good one. We've tried very, very hard to partner as closely as we can with the different workses, right? In our case, HS works, so Homeland Security works, and AF works for the Air Force. And so basically what we've experienced kind of going through these processes, relatively quick opening dates for different proposals. And that kind of forces us to try to position ourselves as best we can. And really the way that we've tried to counteract this is, to give ourselves as much time as possible and to try to influence as much as we can. The outcome in our favor has been, proactive engagement with different stakeholders, and making sure that we're in touch and in tune with what they're really trying to accomplish with their different programs. And when they do technology acquisition, that we're going to be the right solution set for them. So that also means that, not only are we trying to engage with the different stakeholders with, say, Department of Homeland Security, or within the U.S. Air Force, but also working proactively with different partners that are going to be able to give us much more of a leg up throughout the process. So when it comes to going through the SBIR process and experiencing, okay, we've got a shortened timeline that we need to react to. Okay, well, we've already done a lot of the legwork. We've engaged with the right stakeholders at, say, Department of Homeland Security. We already have a sense of what they're looking for. We've been talking with them about it. We've seen this coming up over the horizon. We've been able to kind of pre-position ourselves a little bit, discuss with partners ahead of time. And then, to the extent that we're able to, well, if we're going back to the executive order discussion, flood the zone, putting in enough, the right amount of proposals in front of those stakeholders at the different government agencies so that we have a few different ways that we could potentially win the bid.
Great. Casie, the DoD seems to have created its own special processes and programs. Can you tell us about the DoD's Blue program and then how AUVSI's Green program builds upon that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the 2023 NDAA, there was a provision, the American Security Drone Act, and so that required that critical components couldn't be sourced from countries of concern. And so aside from having that in law, we need a way to verify that platforms are compliant. And so DIU created the Blue UAS program to certify those programs. So it both included cybersecurity and supply chain analysis to essentially say, are we compliant with NDAA? Great program. However, it did create a bottleneck where it became the default program for everything. So federal government was using it, some state and local were using it because there wasn't anything else available. DIU isn't set up, nor is it intended to have all platforms go through this process, right? Not all platforms are meant to be dual use. Not all platforms are intending to sell into DoD. So it just didn't make sense to grow the program in that way. So that was when AUVSI launched the Green UAS program, also in 2023. And so part of that program was to solve for that problem of scalability and access. So for the Blue UAS program, historically, you have to be selected, go through the process, have a sponsor, get an ATO, do all of these things. And the Green UAS program partnered to be able to say, here's an open access. You can apply at any time. You can self-fund and go through the same type of rigorous process. So there was just an announcement last Friday that they are opening the Blue UAS program. So they are looking to expand it. And that's exactly what the Green UAS program was kind of designed for. So it was a really good validator of our work to say now anyone can apply for access. They can go through AUVSI's Green UAS is going to be one of those means of compliance to get onto the Blue UAS cleared list that they're calling it now. So you can actually just actively apply and go through that. They're going to do another session here at AUVSI on Thursday afternoon to answer some of those questions, both for those that are already on the list and those looking to get on the list. So essentially, those are kind of the two hand-in-hand programs for cybersecurity and supply chain verification that go hand-in-hand with NDAA compliance.
So do you have any success stories that you can talk to about coming out of the green program for AUVSI?
Yeah, we've had a few different success stories for a few different use cases. So we've had 2 green UAS platforms successfully transition onto the blue UAS program before it was a direct pathway. So it was already a really good way to verify compliance that DIU was accepting. Now that we have that announcement from last Friday, we hope to see a lot more of that if you can apply and transition over. Some of the tangential success stories that we've had are platforms going through the process and realizing that because of the complexity and opaqueness of supply chains, they didn't even realize that they weren't compliant. And so having experts that do this all the time found those gaps and those holes, and those companies are able to shore it up. So sometimes it's as simple as updating your operating system. Sometimes it's as complex as changing out supply chains. So some of these platforms will go through, months and months of change to be able to get to compliance. That is the other part of the Green UAS platform or process. It's not a pass or fail program. We get you to compliance. We give you the remediation opportunities. So I would say on the supply chain side, that was another success story. And on the cyber side, just being able to say, here's some general cyber hygiene things. We know that a lot of the companies entering the space may be small businesses that don't think about cyber first. So being able to kind of cyber harden there. And we do have a partnership with the University of Tulsa, where they're complimentary cyber advisors. So they can work with you to get you up to that standard.
Great. So those stories are great. And this is a great segue. So we're going to turn to Tom Swoyer of GrandSKY. Tom, you and your team have been very successful in obtaining government contracts and funding for Project Ultra. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I can talk about that all day. This is and I'll be 3 shows daily, tip your bartenders.
15 minutes. So.
Yeah. The Project Ultra, and people need to understand it. Project Ultra is simply an IDIQ contract through the Office of Undersecretary of Defense. One of the things that we did, it was an existing program of sorts in that it was not a program of record, but the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for ANS were purchasing services and were doing a lot of work around UTM and other kinds of traffic management. And as they started to, and what happened was the senior senator from North Dakota, Senator John Hoeven, was adding money and plussing up that budget and starting to realize that not enough of that money was coming back to North Dakota. So he raised his hand and said, wait a minute, hey, stop a second here. We're appropriating millions of dollars a year and only a little bit of it's coming to North Dakota. And so they turned and looked at the Northern Plains test site, a whole bunch of folks who are here, who are incredible partners and did a lot of that work. The OUSD said they didn't want to necessarily go through a university procurement. They wanted a different way. So we proposed a sole source assignment through Grand Forks County. So a county entity is the sole source awardee of that contract and then hired us to manage it on their behalf for a variety of different reasons. Project Ultra was entirely a constructed name. If you work with Senator Hoeven, you'll know he likes to name things and you might not like the name you get, so you better propose one. And so we proposed Ultra, which is UAS, logistics, traffic, readiness, and autonomy. And so we had to make up a nice acronym so that he could, call us, give us a good name and such. Since then, so that is a 5-year IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, for those of you who don't understand that, which means the government is not guaranteeing to give you anything. It is merely the funnel that I spoke about before that they can provide funding to. And so then they issue task orders, individual project assignments that you really don't have a whole lot of room to deviate from. So the first assignment was to generate a simulation of a logistics flight going from GrandSKY, which is on Grand Forks Air Force Base, to Cavalier Space Force Station, about a 50-mile run using a Class 3 UAS. Now we're in the middle of task order 2. That was completed at the end of September last year. Now we're in the second task order, which is to actually fly it. So we did a bunch of demonstration flights in April. Our primary flights are going to be in July. But in April, what we did was OUSD contracted us to do this work, and they brought in an AFWorks-funded, Navy-contracted, NASA-supported, AFRL-supported flight operation. So all these different federal organizations had to come together into what was effectively two different contract authorities to fly this flight. And we ended up flying 400 miles with a Class 3 on a single, it's a hybrid gas VTOL. Flew 400 miles, flew back and forth to Cavalier Space Force Station to prove that it could safely be done. And again, our partners with the Northern Plains Test Site, a lot of whom were involved with that flight, kept the flight safe. We were able to use the 48803 Foxtrot waiver with that the test site can bring to the table and bring to all of you for a public. It's almost like a public aircraft ops, but not really. But they can bring your aircraft into the air and they can cover your airworthiness and get you the waivers to fly anywhere in the country. They can do this. So I highly recommend you talk to them. But long story short is our goal was to bring all of the contract capacity, meaning the government can come to us and say, okay, we want you to do this now. And that contract already exists. And we're able to then just write a project work scope, give it to them, price it. And they say, okay, great, we're going to fund that. Go ahead and go do that work.
Neat. So, Tom, what are some other lessons that you learned that you would like to share, give to others about so they can be successful in obtaining some of these government contracts?
Sure. I think that right out of the gate, is to constantly be scanning for RFPs or RFIs. There is very inexpensive services that will just drop them right into your email inbox. I highly recommend finding one or two, getting those RFIs and RFPs to your inbox. When you see them, if the terms of the proposal requirements you don't feel are too onerous, send a proposal in. Figure out how to build a machine inside your organization to be able to send those proposals in, because sometimes a lot of people, they don't get many bids. And maybe they want to talk to you about what your opportunities are and what you can bring to the table. So I highly recommend you've got to get a machine going to put the proposals in. The second thing is do not overthink the RFP. If they ask for X, Y, and Z, give them X, Y, and Z. The proposal is not the opportunity to tell them why they're approaching it wrong and how they're doing it incorrectly and how they could be doing it a whole different way and saving tons of money and all those kinds of things. They asked for X, Y, and Z, give them X, Y, and Z. I think those are probably the two biggest lessons that we've worked through because we started to get full of ourselves too and pontificate in proposals. And I said, well, that's not what we asked for. We asked for this. So just answer the mail and just do that. And then find someone who actually understands federal contracts, who actually understands all the FAR clauses and understands all the terms and conditions that flow down, that you are going to have to give to subcontractors, that you're going to have to answer with respect to potential future audits on labor rates, how you're coming up with the pricing that you're coming up with. We're starting to see this a lot more in OTAs. We see OTAs everywhere. Other transactional authority, which lets federal contracting shops. And remember, your customer, he may be my customer with the money, but she may be my contracting officer. And so my contract is with her, and this is where I've got to answer the mail, but this is the stakeholder who's funding it all. And so those are oftentimes not the same things. So finding those contracting agencies, Corps of Engineers, Naval Facilities Engineering Command, AFRL, AFWorks, they're very good at those things. Those are the places to kind of go look.
Cool. So Dan, MatrixSpace has also had great success in working with the DoD and other federal agencies. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and what you've learned from them?
Yeah, I just want to pause one thing on what Tom just said right now, which is the idea of pontificating in your RFPs. I talked about this earlier, right? Which is the idea of trying to be as proactive as possible. But like, my God, if you're pontificating in the RFP, you've kind of already lost, right? At a certain point, like you want to try to find these bids, and influence is basically the best way that I can put it, where essentially it's just you've engaged with the stakeholders. In our cases, with a recent contract that we won with HS Works, I had a deep relationship with the individual that ended up writing the RFP. That goes back several years. And so I had advance notice that there was an RFP coming. I had a chance to talk with him about our technology. to advise him both on the pros and cons of our technology. And by the time the RFP came out, it meant that we were very, very competitive. So I didn't have to pontificate, thank God, but I could lay everything out. And to the second point of what you just said, yeah, we try very, very hard to be as transparent about our technology throughout these different processes, regardless of the contracting vehicle, to the extent that, yeah, they ask us, a specific data point, and we give them that data point. If we can't get that, if we don't have that data point, we try to get that data point for them, so that we come across as credible. Again, we're answering the RFP in a way that we think is advantageous to us as much as we can. To the extent, and again, proactivity, and just making sure that we're on top of these discussions. We also work very, very closely with a number of retired military officers to help us build relationships as well. And so we won a recent TACFI through AFWorks, our relationship with a retired 3-star general was absolutely instrumental to that. And again, it gave us the advance notice that there was a bid coming out, and we were able to prepare for it. And of course, one of the tricky things with the TACFI is you have to get one-to-one funding. So not only do you have to get the funding from, the actual government contractor, government itself, but you have to get some other type of external funding. And so we were able to find an angel investor that supported us ahead of that TACFI, and we were able to kind of line up all our ducks in a row. And so we de-risked the TACFI for ourselves, and we were able to go for it. And now we've won that award, and we're going to start implementation with that particular government customer later this year. So proactiveness is definitely your friend, and to the extent that you can, God, I made that machine to write the RFPs in my company, and to the extent that you can be ready and have all the resources at hand so you can quickly respond is absolutely critical.
So Dan, looking back on these successes, and just hearing from what you would say and assuming that it was a lot of hard work to fight and win for some of these contracts, what are some of the things you wish you knew back then that you should, for government contracting that you would know now?
Oh man, I mean, to the extent that as much as you can try to influence and proactively engage, it's never going to come out the way that you expect, right? There are always going to be multiple people that have their finger in the pie, and you're always going to be have to be reactive, and so in some ways, coaching my team to be flexible and to be looking for the RFPs that, even the ones that we had a chance to try to kind of nudge in our direction to be a little bit more flexible. And again, sometimes, coaching people within your staff not to pontificate is also difficult. So there's nothing like particularly major. I've been doing RFPs for, close to 10 years throughout my career. So in a lot of ways it was kind of expected, but also I think it's, coaching your team internally to make sure that you have everybody kind of aligned in just the right way. You have that machine well tuned, and everybody's expecting the best possible outcome. You're level setting those expectations with them to make sure that you are responding in the best way and getting the best possible result.
Great. So let's go to some top tips because we're getting close to the end of our session. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, you can go from left to right or right to left, however you would like to start, but give me one of your top tips in obtaining a government contract. So who'd like to kick that off?
Dan already has the microphone.
So Dan,
that's great. I love hearing myself talk. This is perfect. So it's being proactive as much as possible. Getting out in the field with government stakeholders well in advance of any RFP, even before you even have an inkling that they may be looking for something. If you have the chance to engage with those government stakeholders, show off your technologies or your product sets, and give them a sense of what you can do ahead of time, that's going to be hugely positive, because by the time the RFP comes around, you're already a known quantity. So to the extent that you can be proactive, do so.
I would say top tip is definitely not only finding better together solution sets, so other technology partners that work well with your own, so that you can package it together and present it to your users, but also I'm going to shamelessly plug here, but work with a distribution partner, like someone like Carahsoft, to help manage those contract vehicles for you and just really take that weight off. And then as well as even just finding RFPs and RFIs and things like that. So I think, just working all together and combining industry with government, it's going to really lead to success.
I think that I have two top tips. The first one is to differentiate between you're trying to find money in the federal government to do what you want to do versus the federal government paying you to do what they want to have done. And it's that latter case where you can find the contracts and deliver a solution rather than trying to find money to do something that you would prefer to do versus what they want. So I would say focus on what they want, because they're much more interested in spending money and they're ready to spend money. The second thing is you don't have enough video of your product. You need to have more video. You need to have a lot of good imagery of what it is you're doing, of your team doing it. Pictures say 1,000 words. So I highly recommend just whip your phone out and film what you're doing, because that just changes the game entirely, in my opinion, of helping people understand what it is you're bringing to the table.
So I think we've heard two really interesting success stories that are very different. And I think that actually emphasizes that there is a real moment of creativity happening here. You can have a FAR-based IDIQ, you can have a CIBR contract, you can look for the RFIs that are on the street, you can shape your own opportunities. And so for me, I think become aware of the full range of government authorities for this kind of work. Become aware of research opportunities through CRADAs or vendor demonstrations or university partnerships, as well as those FAR-based opportunities that are on the street or the regular SBIR cycle. All of these are tools that gives you, more shots on goal to have more success and more pathways towards convincing a customer that you've got a solution that's really viable for the government. So with that said, easier contracting, more flexible opportunities does not necessarily mean lower risk. So make sure you do have those people that are really aware of how government contracting works. And if you don't have them on hand, feel free to give us a call.
Obviously focused based on the work that I do, I think getting ahead of cybersecurity and supply chain compliance, and being able to have that understanding, that transparency into your systems and also into your supply chains to be able to be agile and nimble. These are all evolving regulations that are going to continue to evolve. And it's one of those things with the growth of AI that it's just expanding exponentially every year of what the risks are, what the challenges are. So would encourage most here, especially if you're in the law domain, to connect with your technical team and talk about zero trust architecture and how you can build out from these things from the bottom up to be able to adjust as those regulations evolve. I think in the past couple of years since I've been here, there's been so many changes it's hard to keep up with. So being able to adjust your platforms, your programs, even your corporate cyber hygiene to comply.
So as we're getting ready to end this panel, we're going to go through some concluding remarks. So we're going to start with you, Casie, at the end, since you have the microphone. But if you can just kind of tell everyone how we can learn more about your work and how they can reach you.
Yeah, we have actually a few panels. We have one this afternoon with the university folks. So that's a lot about getting access to grant-funded resources. So we're trying to bring these resources to get this information and access to you. And then also on Thursday, as I mentioned, DIU will be with us for a Q&A session on Blue UAS, those changes and reforms that we've been working with them on, and how the Green UAS program fits into the puzzle. So encourage you to go there. And then other than that, AUVSI.org has everything you're going to need on the Green UAS side. I also wanted to quickly plug, as we talk about federal business opportunities, for those of you that are AUVSI advocacy members, in our Advocacy Weekly newsletter on Fridays, at the very bottom, there is updated by our research team, federal business opportunities that are customized to the unmanned, uncrewed, autonomous systems. So we've already done that curation for you. So just make sure you scroll all the way to the bottom of our very helpful newsletter.
Crowell & Moyne LLP, please go to the website. We're a 45-year-old firm that specializes in highly regulated industry. Aviation and defense are our core. It's what we do out of Washington, D.C., around the country and around the world. So if you need support in this space, there's no one better positioned, I don't think, to help you. I've done deals like the deals that are described here under all of the authorities that I've mentioned today over the last 5 years. And I love the flexibility and the uniqueness that we're experiencing right now in government contracting.
The easy answer, Law Tech Connect and autonomyglobal.com. Those are the places to go. Our website, projectultra.com, www.projectultra.com, is a great place to start with us. We are actually about to start looking for Class 3 cargo UAS that we can start flying with, as well as a bunch of traffic management with an eye towards detection, identification, and tracking within a Class Delta airspace, which is an Air Force base. Those two task orders are likely to be awarded to us here in the next couple of months. And so we have to start to fill out the technology stacks for both of those. So projectultra.com is a place to kind of just reach out and connect. Kevin's yelling at me. -UAS, sorry. Okay, find me afterwards. I screwed up the website already. I'm sure it's on Law Tech Connect somewhere correctly, though. So that would be a great play.
You could reach us. We're sponsoring the AUVSI Expo Rodeo tonight. We also have an exhibit booth, number 2604. So we'll be here all week, myself and a few team members. Visit our website. If you just Google Carahsoft and Autonomy Robotics, you'll be able to view our entire portfolio, how to partner with us, or just reach out to myself and my team at drones@carahsoft.com.
And for MatrixSpace, well, you can visit us at www.matrixspace.com, where we lay out all of our different technology offerings. But we're here. We're exhibiting the rest of this week, so please visit our booth. I'm doing a very bad job because I can't remember our booth number. 1520. So please come down, check it out. We'll have live feeds of several systems and installations that we have set up all over the country. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So would love to connect.
So we've done real well on time. So thank you guys. Thank all of you for that. So we have some time for some questions. So I know I have a question, but I'm going to hold it out to the audience first. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for this great panel?
Yeah, my name is Kay Cruz with Skyfish Drone Operations. We fly 400 feet above and we dive ROV 400 feet below. But I just wanted to point it out. It's not really a question, but Tom, is that correct? You brought up a really good point about video. All of you look at everybody's video competitively on all different phases, right? And the one thing when you're doing video, and it's great to whip out the phone because it's there, it's portable, but always remember your production values when you do your video. The lighting, what you're trying to get across with your product, the personnel that work with your group, and your associations, whether you're test flying, whatever it is you're presenting, the production values are extremely valuable to the potential client, to your audience, because that's what they look at first. You'll always get your message across, but if your production values are high, they know that you're very acute at doing what you're doing in your business. Thanks.
There's a question in the back, I think.
So I think the question was the university for the cyber hardening program or cyber advisory program is University of Tulsa, and then also Oklahoma State University, and that's through the Tulsa Innovation Labs. They have the Theta grant, which I can't think of the acronym for, but something about technology.
Any other questions from the audience before I ask mine? Oh, down on the end.
Is it Michael on the second? Hi there, Bree O'Neill, Principal Systems Engineer. Michael, I think I heard you made a comment about improved software acquisition processes. Do you have any examples you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened in DoD in March is that there was a Hegseth memo that made the software acquisition pathway that had actually been really kind of complex and very heavy on the cybersecurity and the ATOs transition to commercial solutions openings in the OTA process. So basically reverting towards a pitch deck type of competition, and then the flexible OTA authority to negotiate the awards. And so we'll expect that to start coming through. It's going to depend on your buyer. I mean, what we are experiencing right now is a lot of acquisition offices still just copy and pasting the same stuff into OTAs. What we're doing there is really aggressively using the Q&A process to point out why they should do it a different way and to point out the authorities that they have to be more flexible. So on a recent software for contested logistics solutions, we put in, with a number of other offerors, over 120 Q&As and got significant revisions to the statement of work and the terms of the OTA competition before the actual closing date for the pitch slides. And so that's one approach that we take to try and wrestle this into shape. It's going to be a process, and I think, having good counterparts and knowing your buyer will be important, but we can also help with that shaping even after it gets out onto SAM.gov.
Thank you. I'm curious, you mentioned how quickly the regulatory schemes are changing, and how do you keep up with that? I mean, administrative law has typically been much more staid, and is it going to change that quickly? Is it changing weekly, and also then how do you keep up with making sure that what was true 2 months ago and you're getting a contract 6 months later or a year later those are gonna jive, that they're gonna stay in line with each other?
Yeah, great question. Look me up on LinkedIn or send me an email. We have a daily update across administrative actions because it is changing daily. And, the government has emphasized something like the FAR 2.0 rewrite. Maybe that will have notice and comment rulemaking and it'll be a little slower, maybe it won't. But what we're seeing is daily almost FAR deviations coming out to change the way the government is actually working to award these contracts. And so, having that alignment between what you bid on and what you receive is going to be more important than ever. It's, again, where faster does not mean lower risk for the contractor. It may mean higher risk during this transition period. But we have updates that go out literally every day. They are lengthy, and we have trackers that will go back back to January 20th.
Thank you. What advice do you have for staying on top of the supply chain when ordering parts for a company?
I would advise to use a service or partner with a service. There are so many supply chain transparency services now that go beyond just what your bill of materials says. So when we typically get the bill of materials and it looks fine, and then you go into the shipping documents. So those can all be publicly sourced, right? So the shipping documents have to match the factory documents that have to match, the multi-factory documents that it's gone through before. And as a company, to use your resources to do that would just make no sense. It's too hard to do if you're only doing it every once in a while. So using those partners. So Green UAS uses a partner called Solid Intel, and they're an AI first company that does that large data processing. There's other ones, Autonomy, Sayari, and they go really deep into that. And the main part of it is a lot of historically how we had monitored this is a snapshot in time. That doesn't do anything anymore. It's change in ownership. The other part of that we're assessing is foreign influence in ownership. And so being able to say, okay, that changed hands and it's now at risk, and being able to say there's levels of risk, right? So there's what's written into policy today. And then when you look at levels of risk, you get ahead of how it's changing constantly. So I would say using a partner that does it all day, every day, that's their sole focus, is the only way in this super complex landscape to be able to stay on top of it.
Hey, good morning. I think earlier you mentioned that there was a change that came up with regard to the Blue UAS program on Friday, and I was not aware of that. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, so DIU announced on Friday that they are going to be opening up and making some reforms to the Blue UAS list. So this is something that AUVSI has been advocating for a long time. How do we get more access to this that doesn't overburden DIU? And so they're opening the process to third-party compliance assessors to assess, so that essentially a company can now opt in, self-certify, self-fund that certification, and then be considered directly for the blue list. So that's something that we had a memo of understanding with the DIU to do before for the green UAS list, but it was never a direct causation of you're on green and now you go to blue. This is formalizing more of what that ecosystem of multiple vendors being able to do compliance looks like. And that's kind of how we've always set up the green UAS program, is that it's an option to go through. You can self-fund, you can get up to the standard, and then be considered on the blue UAS list. Whereas before, historically, blue UAS had been like you get picked and then you're on it. There's demand for it, or DIU wants to see you on it. Last year, they evolved to do the Blue UAS Refresh Challenge. And so they put out an RFP for everyone to submit and get in. And what they did was look at not only compliance, which the Green UAS platforms had, but also warfighter capability and need. And so they did a fly off at 29 Palms in California to see how the capabilities were of the platforms, and they selected from there. And so then it was, okay, you're going to have to wait another year if you want to get onto the program to apply. So now it's going to be an open process. You can apply anytime, get to compliance, get listed on there. So you have a lot more access into DoD. And as I mentioned earlier, the kind of default standard has been written in GSA that I know they mentioned earlier. So things like that will open up more of that access to companies not directly focused on DoD warfighting, but want to be in more of the federal procurement area. So the only thing that won't happen when you go through this process is you won't have your full authority to operate. And so that would require for that program for that DoD area to do your ATO, but that is only for specific DoD needs if you're going through it on that side.
Good morning, Lance Solms. I'm a contracting officer for the Department of Defense. I guess this is probably to Tom or maybe to you, Eric. A couple of comments and then a question. So when we're posting the requirements, some of them are just out of our hands, right? So the software doesn't have an authority to operate. So yes, we're asking, our ask is for software that's 2 or 3 iterations late because that's the one that's approved. We could have issues with funding. It expires on 30 September or lately, it just hasn't been approved by Congress at all. And we're, at some sort of fiscal cliff, which happens quite a bit. But my question is how, or if you can give it a good example of someone or some entity, specifically in the DoD, if you have a choice, that's posting a good requirement, one that's not so specific, but one that's not too vague for a vendor, for a contractor. Thanks.
I don't think I've found one yet. And I hate to be, broadly vague about that, but there's always been some challenge, and usually it's, the technical requirement is very clear, and you can understand that. But like you said, it happened to us last year. They awarded at the end of May fiscal dollars that had to expire in the end of September. And the reporting requirements alone made that a particularly onerous task to do that. So we found problems. What I personally look for, and maybe this is a kind of roundabout way to answer your question, but what I look for is kind of broad categories of capabilities in an OTA that then you can award that without a big obligation on funding and things, and then you can find the funding partners. So this would be a contracting agency, maybe yours. We found one, Air Force Materiel Command out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base came out with an OTA type agreement that just covered basic technical areas, traffic management, covered platform development, some other things like that then you could come into and then write specs against and then define that requirement and define the funding value for it. The problem with that particular requirement, that particular agreement, was that it was unfunded in its own right. And so you had to go find funders, which I would prefer to have. Give me the contract vehicle and let me go hunt. I would much prefer to have that than to really go find very specific funded requirements. I would like to go, shop around and find the different organizations that are looking to, buy something.
I mean, fixed price, performance based. So you're not doing statements of work. Let them have a problem statement. Let them bring you a solution. I think DIU does a really good job. I think DevCom Aberdeen has been flexible with me in the past, but we should definitely follow up. There are definitely shops that are doing a good job in this area, and I'd love to connect.
For me.
I see a lot of RFPs.
Yeah.
All right. That is all she wrote. Let's give them a hand, everybody. Woohoo!